Hi there, Amy. Getting your morning coffee?
Hey there, Joey. You know I can't function without my coffee. Is your year off to a good start?
It is. I've got a great lesson planned for today.
Let's hear it.
Well, my class has read The Bet by Anton Chekhov. We focused on the theme of capital punishment. My goal with future lessons is to continue to focus on the big idea of the meaning of life. I have aligned 3 lessons around this big idea. Today the focus of the lesson will be on English language.
How interesting. I wish I were in your class. Please continue.
The standard that is best aligned with my learning objective states, students determine or clarify the meaning of unknown and multiple meaning words or phrases based on 8th grade reading and content, choosing flexibly from a range of strategies. I plan on accomplishing this goal by teaching music lyrics as poetry.
Say what?
Today my students will study the song Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen.
You are brave, my friend.
Well, by teaching a song my students can relate to, I will allow an infinite amount of access. Many of the students will be able to culturally relate to this song by Queen, which will adhere to the sociocultural learning theory. I will accommodate to my students by having them hear the song and also analyze the lyrics in print. I will also be addressing the constructivist theory. As you will see in the comparison to Chekhov's text The Bet, the students will build on prior knowledge of capital punishment to understand new terms in relation to the theme and the subject of English. The students will also work together to share information further adhering to the sociocultural theory. Of course, all other learner needs will be addressed individually.
You have a very fascinating approach to constructing lesson plans.
I learned from the best at USC. Let's grab coffee and continue our discussion.
Sounds good.
The learning objective is that my students will be able to decipher the meaning of unknown words by analyzing the context, breaking down words into individual parts, and determining multiple uses. This will be assessed through a worksheet I have created. I will first play the song. Then have the students annotate the lyrics of the song focusing on unknown vocabulary, as defined on the worksheet. The trick is that the students will also have to fill in many blanks where words have been removed. The difficulty of the words will vary. The text Bohemian Rhapsody is very difficult for 8th graders. I will have to model how I would determine the meaning of a few potential unknown words. The worksheet does have a final assessment that asks the students to complete a KWHL chart using one unfamiliar word in the text.
What is KWHL?
What do I know about the word? What do I want to know? How do I find out? And what have I learned? I will show the students how to look at the context, the individual parts, and the multiple meanings of words. I will also have the students discuss in groups one possible meaning of the song, what words were learned, and report back to the class.
That's amazing. The students will be able to relate to your song choice. This choice supports your big idea, the standards, and your goals. Some good words I can think of in the song are Beelzebub and monstrosity. Very nicely done.
Thank you. I really want my students to be able to determine the meaning of unknown words and texts. I also wanted to use a text that is interesting but challenging.
The students were thrilled with the day's lesson. They could not believe they got to study a song by Queen. Later that day Joey heard one of his students use the word bohemian as he passed a group. This was a bonus assessment to the questioning, observing, and review of worksheets he already completed. The following 2 days he hopes to continue the excitement by teaching the film The Green Mile.
Good morning class and welcome to today's lesson. We will be continuing with the big idea of the meaning of life and capital punishment. Is money more important than life itself? We learned in The Bet that nothing is more important, no matter the circumstances. I have a riddle for you all to solve. What does man love more than life, fear more than death or immortal strife? What the poor have the rich require, and all contented men desire? What misers spend and spendthrifts save? What all men carry to the grave? I'll repeat it one more time aloud as you follow along on the board. What does man love more than life, fear more than death or immortal strife? What the poor have the rich require, and all contented men desire? What misers spend and spendthrifts save? What do all men take to the grave? Anyone?
I believe I know. Is it nothing?
That is correct. Thank you, Sarah. I'd like to switch gears and ask you a few questions. You are to discuss the questions with your neighbor and be prepared to present a verbal response. What are some examples of situations where people risk their lives? Do you ever risk your own life? And if so, how do you justify it?
As the students begin discussing their thoughts, Mr. Slater walks around the room to motivate them to push their ideas further. He questions some and asks others to further explain. Mr. Slater then shows his students a handful of video clips. The first is of a football tackle. He knows Sean plays the sport. The next clip is from a Surfline.com special called Greatest Wipeouts. He knows Adam surfs. The final clip is of a near biking collision. He knows a majority of his students commute by bicycle. The purpose of this activity is for the teacher to engage the students and get them further thinking of situations where humans often place their lives on the line. Mr. Slater then introduces his students to the poem, To Risk, by William Ward. He passes out copies before asking a student to read it aloud. Students will be able to create a multimedia graph to illustrate their understanding of justifiable risks versus unjustifiable risks. The written description on the overhead provides students with direct instructions and one example. There must be at least 6 sections. 4 risks, 2 justifiable, 2 unjustifiable and 2 examples with some supporting evidence. Evidence can include personal experiences. One piece of evidence must come from the poem, To Risk. The visual creation on the iPads we have available can be a Prezi, PowerPoint, or anything else you choose. The students can work with a partner and have approximately 1 hour. The results will be shared on the class wiki for future commenting. The standard aligned with this lesson states, students will use technology, including the internet, to produce and publish writing and present the relationships between information and ideas efficiently as well as to interact. The use of the school's iPads, along with the creation of a multimedia presentation, creates the connection to this standard. While the video clips are chosen based on student interests and hobbies, this enabled the teacher to model his examples and address the sociocultural theory. His students were interested in the examples as well as the poem, which was difficult but within their zone of proximal development. Mr. Slater incorporated the behavioralist learning theory into this lesson through positive reinforcement. He constantly awards appropriate behavior by issuing team points. He also models desired behaviors and results himself. He was pleased with his students' ability to create the presentations and apply critical thinking. This question on risking one's life relates to the big idea of the theme of capital punishment in terms of justifiable and unjustifiable risks and commitments. It requires the students to think about other perspectives on risk, and particularly risking one's life for an unjustifiable purpose. Joey, or Mr. Slater, had originally created this big idea on the importance of life and not materials or money. He wants his students to be able to compose an argument that compares and contrasts the views on life and material wealth in Chekhov's The Bear to Leo Tolstoy's How Much Land Does a Man Need? What Mr. Slater wants his students to ultimately be able to do is analyze texts for their main themes and write an argument that supports or rejects the meaning presented using textual evidence, logic, and reasoning. In order to do so, Mr. Slater must spend a few days scaffolding the writing process for composing an argumentative paragraph. Once the students understand how to compose an argumentative paragraph, the final text will be introduced. The learning objective for this text will focus only on the class period. However, the students will use the draft they create to begin peer review and the creation of the final product. For this one lesson, the students will be able to analyze the short story How Much Land Does a Man Need? By Leo Tolstoy, create an argumentative stance that critiques the meaning of text using one piece of supporting evidence, a summary of the evidence and one example of how the evidence supports the claim. This aligns with the standard that says students will be able to write arguments to support claims with clear reasons and relevant evidence. I will provide the students with a detailed roadmap to help them decipher the meaning. The text is reasonably difficult but within the student's ability to figure out. The roadmap will act as a reading strategy for reading comprehension. It will ask students to consider prior knowledge and personal meanings, which aligns with the cognitive and cultural learning theory. The text was chosen for the difficulty, relatability, but first its relationship to the theme of greed and material things and what I want the students to walk away with. Any life is better than no life and that life should be appreciated and considered before material representations. This lesson that Mr. Slater is seen working on here will ask the students to road map the text. This will ensure the students have some understanding. It will also scaffold the next day's lesson. The students will use the class period to compose an in-class response that addresses the learning objective previously mentioned. The students will eventually compare this text to the original text, The Bed by Chekhov, which will act as a final assessment.